Okay. I think we are live. I'm just gonna give it a maybe like 20 or 30 seconds just to do all my sound checks, and then maybe we'll get started afterwards. Just double checking all the audio is working okay. Let's see if we can actually add some music too while we wait for folks. Maybe lo-fi music or ambient music. What's that? No, that's a little too distracting. Okay, atmosphere seems fine. Let's go with atmosphere. Maybe lo-fi. Okay, I think audio is good, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, it's been a while since I've done one of these, and I figured I'd try to get back into these monthly live streams. Now that my schedule is still kind of weird as I try to figure out what's is going on. I think some people know, some people don't. But my last day at my full-time job was yesterday, and I'm kind of in a weird pickle right now of finding my routines and in transition of moving all my things from Virginia over to Florida, where my grandma resides. So I'm kind of all over the place right now, but I'm trying to get back into this groove of maybe doing monthly live streams. See, Steven's on. What's up, Steven? Thanks for helping me confirm that the audio is working. Zeptau, you says you're running errands. Very cool. Or maybe you're coming back later. Well, thanks for confirming. Okay, we are going to keep this more so. Typically, I have a list of questions. It looks like there hasn't been as much. I have 5 questions lined up. One I kind of combined, and then we can just take questions live as they come in. So, seems like Lowe's food parking lot. Oh, that's great. This is my food nowadays, by the way. I don't know if you guys like this. Very typical tech person. I don't really have time for lunch, so I've been drinking these for like probably a year and a half. Lowe's food, for some reason, makes me think of like hot dogs and chicken bakes and pasta, but chicken bakes I think is Costco. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna go ahead and post the first question here. Looks like this one was from just like 2 weeks ago, and it looks like a very technical question. So let's see. Let me find the question itself. Okay, I'm probably gonna have to cut this off because it looks pretty long. Let's go ahead and add this. And I forgot to give my spiel, by the way. If you guys have questions, I'm gonna resume doing these every month. I know some people asked me what happened. Just got really busy. There's a lot more updates to share. I've actually been on FMLA for about 2 months, and so there's a lot of stuff I was trying to take care of behind the scenes in most of this year, actually. But starting these up again, if you have questions, you can always submit these questions ahead of time, which is great, to briankfung.com/AMA. So let's go ahead and start with the first question. We have a very technical one. This is the end of the question. Let me read the whole thing on my screen. So it says, "Hi, Brian. Actually, hold on. Sorry, I'm a little distracted right now. Let me turn down the music. It's actually a little too distracting. How's that? Okay. All right. So the question is, hi, Brian. I came across your video today. I'm not sure which one this is about. I have learned about Postman about several years ago, but I am rusty and have potentially have the opportunity to utilize it in the workspace. I wanted to ask, do you think it's possible for Postman, while utilizing Fire API in eClinical Works, to batch update multiple data sets of existing patients, such as changing a facility in all 100 patients? Okay, that's very interesting. So it sounds like you're interacting with an EHR, eClinical Works. You want to utilize their Fire API, which I assume they have one. Let me just take a little browse here. And I'll share my screen so you guys can see what I'm searching for. So I think they have a Fire. I assume most EHRs have one. Let's see. I have no idea. Yeah, I see some things about Fire, so I assume they have it. Smart on Fire. Yeah, I assume they have one. Let me just try to click one and see if I find any. Share the story. Okay, I'm gonna assume yes because I see some things about it. Okay, I'm just gonna stop sharing. So, assuming you're trying to interact with eClinical Works, which is an EHR, assuming they have a Fire API, using Postman. So if you're not familiar with Postman, it's a fantastic product, especially if you're new to more technical stuff. I think it's a nice intermediary. It almost acts like a client. So there's like a client and a server. And so your client can interact with some server. In this case, you want to interact with eClinicalWorks Fire API, Fire server. So you need some client. Postman can be that client. Now, can you post to it? So what do you want to do? You want to update? I would guess potentially yes, but it really depends on where where the data lives. So facility data and patient data, if the Fire endpoint is available. So changing a facility. So I'm not sure what the data structure is in eClinical Works. It might be like an encounter. I'm not sure. Um, I think it's possible if you can find the data elements in the Fire endpoint that eClinical Works support. You just probably have to check. But I don't know, that's not a good answer. I probably would actually suggest messaging a technical person at eClinical Works and asking if you can hit their Fire API to update this. But my assumption is yes, if what you're trying to change, like facility and patients, is one of the Fire resources, which I assume is yes. It's probably like an encounter and a patient resource. Anyways, hopefully that's helpful. Let's move on to another question here. Oh, this one's interesting. This one I actually saw two questions come up that were very similar, and I kind of grouped them. And let me see if I can share part of it. So this is a two-parter question. I'm going to share both so you guys have an idea of the topic. This one could be a little lengthy. Let me go to the captions. Let me hide this one. So the first question came from someone who's a pharmacist who is getting their master's in data analytics and wanted to ask some questions about it. So I think I was thinking about, the value maybe or the job opportunities afterwards with something like this. And then I had someone else ask a very similar question. And this one is very interesting. I wonder if I can post this whole thing. This next question is not from a pharmacist. Okay, this is too long. I'll post this part of it. This person comes from a background of health informatics already. They're more technical, it seems. They don't have like a clinical background, but they are very much embedded in the healthcare informatics space. So very familiar with like different terminologies. And it sounds like the full question from them is that they've been contemplating their next step. They're more senior, and it looks like they're looking for some new positions maybe, and they are struggling between computer science, biomedical informatics, and AI. They go on to say there's a lot of overlap with BI, CS, AI, and the main concerns with BI being too narrow or focused for career growth. I'll try to answer both of these questions in a more abstract way. I think the first thought here, just in both scenarios, one pharmacist, one non-pharmacist who has healthcare informatics experience. I think the way I usually think through this is, where do you want to go? Like, what are some positions that look very interesting? What are the job responsibilities that look interesting? And what do those positions look like? And then kind of work your way backwards. And what I mean by that is someone's doing a master's in data analytics here, and someone else is contemplating multiple different educational backgrounds in like either CS, biomedical informatics, and AI. And I think it's great to study lots of different things. Like you dabble in different things and you get a lot of breadth, which I think is great. However, I think you want to move towards a goal. And so to give you a concrete example of that is like I really was fascinated with um, I was trying to figure out how to make a larger impact. And larger impact means broader than your organization. How do you go domestic, national, or global? And so what naturally for me that meant pursuing training that allows me to analyze things at that larger scale. So I pursued an MPH because an MPH for me has always taught me to think more on a broad population level. So uh, not to um, how do you say it? I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. The key point is to figure out where is it you want to go and then try to match the educations there. It almost seems like these two questions are much more you're starting from a place of education and figuring out what do I do next with this. I personally probably think that's like more of the wrong approach. Think about where you actually want to go, what do you like to do, and then work your way backwards. The second thing that's kind of related to this, and it was like a subsequent question, is that at some point, I don't want to say there's too much education. I think there is a threshold where you need to start trying to build things or execute on things and not just do the education. Like, to give an example, I was very fascinated with trying to do more in artificial intelligence, starting from like a master's in computer science and then starting to specialize in artificial intelligence. And I was going to do that. I think that was like last year. And I ultimately opted against it for a variety of reasons. But I thought instead I had just enough skills to begin actually applying it. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. Is there's a point where you have to stop consuming education, like the didactics. The homeworks are helpful, by the way, but you have to move towards applying the knowledge that you learn, and you can actually learn and apply at the same time. So to give a concrete example, there is find something that, let's say you have a job you're interested in and you have a job that does X, Y, and Z. Maybe one example is, let's say, use something maybe that I'm more familiar with is creating a database in Fire and or maybe using a Fire server and creating a terminology service on top of it. You know that some role out here, like a HL7 administrator, um, and they do these things on their day to day. So instead of like taking courses, which I recommend, by the way, you should take courses, you should have some general foundations and breadth of knowledge. But at some point, when you're ready, you feel like you know just enough, start trying to implement or apply it. So in my case, what I would do is I started to, of course, I love LLMs right now in AI. They're fantastic teaching tools. Leverage them to teach yourselves those things, and more specifically, how to build those things. So in my case, I could use something like ChatGPT, um, Claude from Anthropic, or Gemini from Google, and ask it, how do I build a Fire terminology server? I'm very interested in it. I already know a little bit about it, but what are the steps required? And then actually doing that, I think there's a lot of value in stop just purely consuming and then just start applying and building. And I've learned a lot personally from doing those things. I don't know if I answered either of your questions here. I hope it's helpful though. Don't start with the education, but start with the end goal in mind and especially the specific things that you would want to do on your day-to-day job. Okay. We have some chats. Okay. S- uh, sorry, I'm butchering your name. Ak Akram 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 Abdel. Apologies in advance. I read your question here. Hi Brian, what skills from the hospital setting translated well into your role at Verily? Also keeping you and your grandmother in prayers. Thanks for the sentiments, by the way. Um, to your question, and thanks for the question. It's a really good question. I think a couple of things, and I think someone asked the question about this in a way too, is about how do you transition into more like a tech role. So I think the first thing, assuming probably from a clinical domain, like a pharmacist, nurse, physician, dentist, PT, the number one skill I would say you bring is your practice experience. So if you got your degree in nursing, you got your degree in pharmacy, that's fantastic. There's a high value in applying that didactic credential. So after I graduated pharmacy school, I did 2 years of residency. I practiced as a pharmacist. And in those couple of years, I got to see what it's like to actually work as a pharmacist. I worked in a variety of areas, ambulatory care, the ED, critical care, all these things. And the problems that you face in the day to day, especially in the hospital setting, has a very high value when anyone, but for me, myself, when I transitioned to Verily, because I can speak on the problems that they have. Verily, like many other health IT vendors, they aim to solve certain problems for various stakeholders. And so if you know what those problems are, then it's very, very helpful for you to guide everyone else on what are the problems that are worth solving. And also, importantly, what are the problems that are not worth solving? So if trying to think of an example, this might be a poor example because I'm not that familiar with the space. Drug shortages. As a pharmacist, we know that they are pretty bad of a problem out there. Uh, I'm not as familiar with all the solutions that manage drug shortages. I just know that ASHP is a great tool that a lot of us use. But if you have actually worked in a hospital and you know those problems, you can better guide fellow colleagues in that area. So that's one. And I kind of rambled on that one a bit. So one is your practice experience that you bring from the hospital setting. The second thing, and this one might be a little odd, is the ability to navigate and work with cross-functional teams. So maybe this one is more of an informatics background, where as an informaticist, when I was working in the hospital setting, most of my experience has been as an informaticist. I worked with a lot of different groups. That was your physician specialty groups, the different pharmacists, the different nurses, the different informatics teams. And so being able to communicate effectively with these different groups and also gain consensus amongst very different stakeholders who have very different priorities has translated very well to Verily, because I engage a lot with different colleagues who come from different backgrounds. So we have product managers, UX researchers, you have engineers, of course, you have pure IT people, you have other clinical people, not as much as a hospital, but similar. So that's another skill set, probably again more so from the informatics domain, that was very helpful in transitioning. So being able to work with many different stakeholders. Maybe I'll say one more just to wrap up this question. And I think related to the hospital setting is bureaucracy. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I come from a lot of I come from primarily academic medical centers that have a ton of bureaucracy, and for good reasons, right? We want to make sure the patients are safe. So there's a lot of committees that decisions must go through to be approved. And so I'm very used to navigating very convoluted processes, or rather creating efficient processes to make decisions and implementations go faster. That has helped a lot go into Verily, because any organization has processes, and I've been able to apply my knowledge of how do we navigate these processes into very efficient decision making at Verily. Hopefully that's helpful. Keep in mind, that number one piece, very helpful, is your practice experience coming from the hospital setting. All right, so there's a lot more questions coming in. We're going to take the live questions as priority over these other ones. So, hey Alex, good to see you on here. I'm sure everyone in the audience probably knows who Alex is. How are you getting clean video from StreamYard? I use it all the time, and it's not as clear as yours. Maybe you're using the high-end premium version. I'm actually using Restream right now. I don't remember my experience using StreamYard. I think it was okay. There is some reason why I liked Restream over StreamYard. I'm actually on a cheap version right now. I'm on 720p. It is a paid version. I think I pay like $100 a year for this, but it's more so for other features that are not the crispy video. I think the crispy video might be just from the webcam on my MacBook, and I use a MacBook Pro. But I do pay for it. It is the most basic, cheap version of Restream for the features of like. Okay, let's move on to another question. This one's from YouTube. I am not going to attempt to pronounce your name. Jangam seems like an easier thing to pronounce. So we'll go with that. And Jangam says, I'm currently a PAX manager and want to learn about Fire. I also know how basic coding, understand basic XML, and some of PyTorch and Monet. I actually don't know what that is. Monet. After all this, don't know what is best for me. Ideally, want to work as a product manager. Okay. I don't know what's best for you. I think it depends. I feel like there might be actually a couple questions about this too. I feel like these days I get a lot of questions about what should we all be when we grow up, and it's a very hard question to answer because it really depends on what you like to do. I would say you did say ideally as a product manager. If you like working with a lot of different people, kind of like the cross-functional thing I was talking about earlier, working with very different personas. So the classic product managers, UX researchers, your subject matter experts, of course, your users, and your engineers. If you like working with very different personas who, of course, have very different priorities, have different ways they communicate, and you like to be able to kind of lead these teams and move towards a common goal to build a product, that could be a fun thing. I did some of that at my former role at Mayo, where I was an informatics pharmacist. It's great. I think you seem like you have a little bit more technical experience, so that's great. I think that's one of the recommendations I typically have for people who want to be product managers. Hopefully, you have more technical skills. It gives you a lot more credibility when you're speaking with your technical colleagues, like engineers, and I think they'd respect you a lot more when you do. And it seems like you have a good amount. You also have domain expertise. It seems like a PAX manager, so you're probably very familiar with different workflows and what happens on the ground. You probably would be a fantastic. I think product managers are communication skills, domain expertise, and technical skills. I think those three make a fantastic product manager. And I mean, you said ideally work as product manager. I think that's great. Maybe working towards that. I don't know if this was an actually question or like to something else. I right now am, I've always considered going back to more of a product role, but I'm much more interested in getting into the nitty gritty right now to just build things. It's just much more of a passion and fun project for me. But this sounds great. There's a lot of opportunities to create better products in this world of packs and imaging. So I don't know if you have a specific question, but this sounds great. You sound like you have great experience for it too. Uh, Alex says looks really nice. Thanks. Yeah, just shout out to Apple, not sponsored, um, for this MacBook Pro. And this is the first generation MacBook Pro on the M1 chip. Mm. Okay, let's continue down our list of questions here. And so we have, let me see, the next question is very similar. Okay, let's find a small part of this question. How to make the transition. So I'm going to read the whole question, but I'm going to go post one part of it since it's the main question. These questions seem to have the same kind of theme of like transitioning into like the health tech space. So I'm going to read the whole question, and this is the last part of it. So the question goes, I checked out your profile and was really inspired to break into health IT market. This really struck a chord with me as I am in the exact same scenario where I am heavily involved with computer science and I am unable to break into the health IT field with the PharmD. Oh, you're a pharmacist, has dabbled with computer science, um, and then wanted to have a chat about guidance in how to make the transition, as I have seen you have success with a similar pathway. Um, so I think this is a great question. How best to answer it? I don't, everyone is very different, right? You guys all have very different skill sets than I do, many of which I don't have. So it's very hard to answer specifically for you without knowing more details. That's all I know about you is that you're interested in computer science and you have a PharmD. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer this from my perspective and what I think has helped me in making this transition into um, the health IT market. I think the first thing is something I mentioned earlier, having some sort of practice experience. So having the degree again is great, the didactics, but actually doing it is a whole nother thing. The experience you have in applying your skills and practicing as a nurse, as a pharmacist, as a physician is extremely beneficial. So that should be kind of obvious, right? So you're a pharmacist, leverage a lot or take advantage of the practice experience that you've had and talk about it in your interviews and even showcase it in your resume to show that, hey, you're not just someone who had a degree, you actually worked as a pharmacist. That's one. And I think that's one of the things that has made it beneficial for me. But that alone, this is maybe a controversial um, comment, that alone is not going to make you competitive for a health IT position. Or maybe what I'll do is I'll add nuance to that. In that, depending on your role, the role that I'm interested in is more technical. And maybe to your question, you're interested in computer science, so maybe you're interested in more technical. If you're interested in a more technical role in health IT, then I think having practice experience alone is not enough. If you're interested in something that's less technical, let's say a product role, then I would say that could be enough. There's other roles besides product. There's like consultants. You can be like advisors and things like that. There are plenty of roles there that you can break into, and even eventually move towards a technical role if you want to. But from my perspective, I'm speaking more on the technical side of things. So moving on to that is having some sort of technical background really helps. And for me, most of my experience is, I'm not going to say it's technical, but I worked in informatics. So there's a lot of technical stuff in informatics. Having a understanding of the different standards you use in healthcare, being able to analyze data very well and very fast, and analyzing not just a little bit of data, I'm talking like millions of rows of data, being able to analyze that, draw insights on it, is very useful of a skill set. So now we're building on that. You have your clinical practice experience, you have some technical analytical experience, okay? That should be enough to get you into there. But I'm telling you more about my experience. I think having that alone, there's a lot of people that have that skill. I think the more breadth you have in a lot of different things, the more competitive and attractive you become as a candidate. And then, so this here leads to something I've said a lot in the past, which is I think to make a big impact in healthcare, there's three things: clinical, there's technical, and there's political or policy, whatever you want to call it. And I think the combination of the three makes you a very attractive candidate. And that's actually what I pursued. So there is, from my personal experience, is my experience in going through the MPH program and interning at the ONC, which is now called ASTP, and having worked on different healthcare regulations. I worked on the 21st Century Cures Act, um, notably the parts that were the ONC interoperability rules that mandated fire, all of that kind of jazz. Having that experience is, in addition to the other ones, in my opinion, makes you very attractive. Again, it's the three: clinical, technical, and political. And that breadth is, the more breadth you have, I would say the more rare of a candidate you become. And then just adding on other things beyond it, going deeper in any one area. So, like right now, I'm going deeper in the technical, I'm going sometimes deeper into the um, political, and it just makes you very attractive because you're able to speak on things at a very high level of precision. So hopefully that's kind of helpful. The TLDR again is maybe just having breadth. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Learn different skills that are very orthogonal to each other, and I think that makes you very attractive. And then once you kind of have that, you can think about going deeper in certain areas. So for me, I've been going deeper into the technical world and building my credibility there. And then lastly, maybe I'll say this to end the question, is having a artifact to show, like some sort of deliverable. So as you're doing your didactics or you're learning about different things, producing something that's tangible, something that people can interact with, be it a little prototype, be it a presentation, be it a poster, be it a blog, just putting your thoughts out there and applying your knowledge and showcasing it to the world. I think that really helps. Okay. We are getting close to time as well. So I think we are going to start wrapping up. We have Kevin in the house. We are on LinkedIn, so I'm going to be a little bit more ambiguous with my comments here. Kevin says, I'm addicted to ABGs. Kevin is in Asia. I'm sure many of those in my audience knows who Kevin is. He's over in Asia. He's having a good time exploring a life that I would actually love to have had and done myself. But he's all over. I think he's in Japan right now. Is that right, Kevin? Should I take Suboxone? Um, I I maybe. You just gotta be careful, man. There's a lot of side effects. I am. Anyways, I kind of stopped there, but it's good to check in with Kevin. All right, I think we are at time. We'll get to the rest of the questions next time. I am trying to get some errands done for grandma. As I said in the very beginning, there's a lot of different logistical things I'm trying to plan out and work through right now because I have my whole life in Virginia and my grandma's in Florida. So I'm trying to figure out how to just get everything organized so I can actually live a life. Kevin, last question here. Serious question. How you dealing with the transition? What are some of the thoughts and feelings you're noticing? Um, yeah. It's a good question, and it's a good question maybe to end on too. Is I think it's probably a feeling that you had, Kevin, when you went through a lot of your time, your the different things you went through with your dad, and then with your job, and all the stuff that happened at that time. I think I have very similar thoughts. I am very scared of running out of money. I have an emergency fund. I have a limited runway. I don't have a paycheck. So I don't know how you managed it, but living on savings is very, very scary. I think I am safe for maybe a year. And so I think the first thought is just being very afraid and worried about running out of money. Um, I think maybe on a more positive note, I think like it feels very I don't know that what's the right word about it. It feels like this is the right thing to do. I thought a lot about different opportunity costs before landing on the decision. I actually thought about traveling all over as one of them. And I think when weighing out all these different things I could do, I thought about going back full time for another degree. I think um, spending quality time with grandma is probably the most important one that resonated with me. So, okay, can't talk too much about grandma. I'm going to get too emotional on video. So, thanks for the last question there, Kevin. Hope everything's going good. You guys follow Kevin if you haven't already. He's living a very fun life right now. I'm sure lots of good experiences over there. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, if you have questions in the future, definitely send them over to briankfung.com/AMA. That's where we get the list of questions. And then otherwise, happy Saturday. Hope you guys are all doing good. Stay safe, and we will see you next time.